Order. Michelle Welsh to move the motion.
Thank you, Chair. And may I say it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. It's an honour to hold this debate today on the construction standards for new build homes. I would firstly like to start by thanking the tradespeople that work in my constituency, the brickies, the sparkies, the plasterers, the plumbers, the joiners and the ground workers, to mention just a few. I know firsthand how hard they work and how poorly they can be treated sometimes. It is important that this is noted throughout this debate. The quality of the work of most tradespeople is something both we and they should be very proud of. This debate has come about as the quality of new builds is an issue for many of my constituents, and why I wanted to raise it today with the Minister. Owning your own home, having your own home, is a dream for many people across the country, including in my constituency of Sherwood Forest. Having a safe, affordable and warm home for all is something we should all be striving for.
Thank you, everybody, for giving way. The clear issue seems to be not with the workers necessarily, but certainly with the developers. There must be rules and legislation in place to ensure that those developers cannot cut corners, cannot ignore the guidelines, and they must adhere to safe properties. If that doesn't happen, and government needs to enforce that in a way that there will be fines if it isn't done to the level that it should be done.
I thank the honourable member for his very important intervention, and I will talk more on that. Over 70% of people in Sherwood Forest, my constituency, own their own home.
Order. We have a division again. If we could return in 15 minutes, or as quickly as you can, but at most 15 minutes. But if you return as quickly as you can, we'll get restarted. Thank you. Order. Michelle Welsh to resume. Thank you.
Thank you. Over 70% of people in Sherwood Forest in my constituency own their own home, either outright or with a mortgage or loan, and a large proportion of those people will be living in a new build home. I know that across the country we need to build more homes, and I'm proud that this Labour government has committed to delivering 1.5 million quality homes over this Parliament. Personally, I know the importance of growing up in a safe, warm house, a place to call your home. Because, of course, new homes being built will be for home buyers, for social housing and for housing some of the most vulnerable living in our communities. But the key to the government's commitment must be quality. There has become a growing narrative around new build homes, suggesting that their construction standards are lower than homes built before. This is because we are too often seeing new build homes that are not fit for purpose, that are damaged, drafty or unsafe to live in. It is wrong that when you are moving to a new home or into your first ever house, that you may not get the quality that you are paying for. I will give way.
I'm very grateful to her for giving way. I just wondered if she would agree with me that not only must the actual house itself be of a very high quality, but it's also essential that the surrounding estate that the house is built on is of a similar quality, because the guarantees and the building certificates that come with a home don't relate to that surrounding estate. And if there are problems with, for example, the drains or the roads, it can be very, very difficult to get them fixed, and that's a nightmare for a new home owner.
Thank you, and I thank the honourable member for her intervention, and I completely agree with this. This is something my constituents have also raised with me. Home buyers deserve to feel confident that their new home is safe and won't begin to crumble as soon as the key is in the door. I wanted to raise an experience of one of my constituents has had faced with their new build. Kelly and her husband Simon moved into their new home in Billsthorpe back in October last year. They opted to go for a new build home because of their disabled son, thinking their new build would be cleaner and they wouldn't have to spend as much time adjusting it to their son's needs. Almost immediately, they realised the high standard and handcrafted home they'd been promised was actually not to be. They discovered there were numerous issues with the house, including an incorrectly fitted and sized boiler cylinder, which left them without heating for 3 days. An improperly installed bath which dropped and left gaps in the tiles, dirty tiles that hadn't been cleaned, damage to the flooring, windows with scratches and stickers left on. I could go on. All of this on top of the usual moving house stress. I know from my own experience from moving house that the days and weeks leading up to moving are taken over by worry about what could go wrong. The last thing you are thinking about is that your new home could contain even more nightmares. When Kelly and Simon raised their issues with their constructors, builders, Harron Homes, they were met with more bad treatment. Through their complaints, my constituents learned that despite some of these issues being known to the site manager and sales executive, the home was in fact signed off. And Harron Homes stated that there was nothing to stop them living in the property and that they were happy with the state of the home. I know everyone here will agree with me that the conditions my constituents faced in the house were certainly not good enough and should have stopped them from being allowed to live in the property, especially with a disabled son. Yes, I'll give it.
I thank the honourable member for giving way, and I feel for her constituents, because even in my constituency of Keighley and Ilkley, in Silsden, Harron Homes carried out a development of 50 plus properties, again, where my constituents faced exactly the same challenges and scenarios sort of snagging that she is quite rightly indicating. And I want to reiterate my call alongside her to the likes of Harron Homes to effectively sort themselves out for the benefit of both of our constituents.
Thank you, the honourable member, for his intervention, and I agree completely. When moving into a new home, you expect a high quality and a safe living environment. We should not be expecting anyone to live in properties that do not meet these standards. What has further shocked me about this case is the treatment of my constituents by Harron Homes. Kelly and Simon in an email were described as a pain and have had to wait weeks for repairs and even just for a response. They deserve better. Yet, they are not alone in their experience. Sarah, a constituent living in Hucknall in my constituency, got in touch with me immediately after I was elected in July regarding her ongoing case with Persimmon Homes. Like Kelly and Simon, Sarah too walked into her new home to find it completely below standards, with over 117 different faults and damages across the property, including damaged flooring, poor insulation, leading to cold spots and plumbing issues. The company had even left my constituent with a broken patio doors that had large gaps around the side, leaving her and her family fearing for their safety as the door couldn't even be locked. There has understandably been extremely distressing for Sarah and for her elderly mother. And whilst Persimmon Homes have offered Sarah some money to put towards the cost of repairs, it will not be enough to cover the full extent of the damages and faults in her home. There are currently still over 70 defects remaining. It is wrong Sarah was ever in this position and that the construction standards of her home were not properly monitored. How many more families like Sarah's have to battle just to get the quality of home they originally paid for? I will give way.
I thank the honourable member for giving way and for the case that she's setting out. This is something that I've experienced with residents in mid-Sussex over a number of years, and in particular in the village of Hurstpierpoint, a village which has taken considerable numbers of new houses, and there have been houses amongst those developments that have been substandard. I think in particular of one family who had a brand new house, and if you ran your hands across the wall, there was a grey film of mould. It took years of hassling the housing association and the developer for them even to admit that there was a problem and they were at fault. So does the honourable member agree with me that if we are to win the hearts and minds of people who are sceptical about housing growth in their villages and towns, then confidence in the quality of new build housing must be beyond question?
Thank you for intervention, and I do completely agree. I was pleased to see that the government announced that they are accepting some of the recommendations made by the Competition and Markets Authority market study into housing building. I'm particularly pleased we are implementing a statutory UK-wide new home ombudsman scheme and supporting the development of a voluntary ombudsman scheme to improve consumer protection ahead of the statutory scheme's launch. For too long, customers have felt like they've nowhere to turn, are not being listened to by the big developers, and they do not know their rights. I hope this is a step towards changing this. I would also like to ask the Minister that when drafting the new UK-wide scheme, that the government puts quality at the heart and ensure that people have all the necessary protection in cases such as the ones of my constituents. We must also have better oversight and accountability for companies who do not deliver high-quality construction standards. It is vitally important that we showcase what good practice looks like. I know there are many builders who do an exceptional job and take great pride in their work. We cannot let the reputation of new build homes be ruined by a few rogue companies. I mentioned earlier that I'm proud this government is committed to delivering 1.5 million quality homes. In my constituency, the quality has sometimes been very lacking. The infrastructure has been very lacking, and the local Ashfield District Council has been gerrymandering with its local plan, which continues to put precious historical land at risk while there are more than enough brown sites to be used across the district. I want to ask the Minister that when we deliver these homes, that they take the necessary steps to ensure that the right companies and builders are selected to complete this work, that we work in order to provide the infrastructure that is needed, and when councils let their communities down, like Ashfield District Council has done, the government steps in. I would also ask the Minister that they ensure that they and local authorities have the necessary oversight powers to ensure that quality is maintained throughout the house building process. We have a real opportunity to build the homes we desperately need, whilst also beginning to close the skills gap and shutting out rogue companies that underperform. Tradespeople need protection so they are able to do a high quality job. I will give way.
I'm grateful she's making an excellent speech, and I agree with many of the points that she is making. But does she agree with me that when you buy a new home, not only do you expect to have the mains water running and electric and gas, in this day and age you also expect to have a good broadband connection? Whilst the last government made significant progress in terms of obliging new house builders to connect properties, the £2,000 cap is sometimes giving developers an opt-out, a get-out from connecting some properties to high-quality broadband. But does she agree that we should go further to ensure that all properties have access to high-speed broadband?
Thank you, and I completely agree with that. With somebody that represents a large chunk of their constituency is very rural, and with these new builds, it's really important that communities like that stay connected. Future generations deserve to know they are buying and or living in quality homes, whether it's in new social housing or their own home that they've purchased. And our construction workers of today and tomorrow, and the future of our housing, relies on us as a government to get this right. Thank you.
Thank you. Because of the intervention, we can now, the various interventions, we can now continue until 7:47 this evening. And I see members are bobbing. So the question is that this House has considered construction standards for new build homes. Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is indeed a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and I want to congratulate the honourable member for Sherwood Forest for securing this important debate. And I'm very happy about this, because Persimmon housing, which she mentioned in her speech, has been on my radar now for about 10 years, both as a local councillor and as a Member of Parliament. We have an estate in Huthwaite, in my constituency, called the Mill Lane Estate, and this was built by Persimmon some 12, 13 years ago. And the standard of work, to say the least, was quite shoddy. There was lots of snagging issues when people had moved in. It's too late then. They've paid the money, they've got the mortgage, they're in these houses, they've got dodgy patios, they've got patio doors that don't fit, they've got kitchens falling to pieces, they've got uneven floors, they've got walls that are not lined up, they've got doors that don't fit. And when they complain to Persimmon, it takes ages for them to actually come out and see these people and put this work right. In fact, they didn't come out at all, so I ended up, as a councillor, putting in formal complaints on behalf of these residents who had snagging problems, and I did it to the previous MP's office, and lo and behold, once the MP got involved and we put formal complaints, they started to come round to people's houses and put the problems right. But it shouldn't be for somebody who's just forked out thousands and thousands of pounds and actually skint themselves to get their new home, their dream home, to have to move into a shoddy home, a brand new home, and then go to the local MP or the local councillor to try and put this work right. It should be, as a brand new home, you would expect it to be right the first time. Imagine waking up one morning and seeing all these problems. You've been in there a week, and this was happening to residents in my constituency. Now, we have another estate, another Persimmon estate in Ashfield called, in Annesley, the Alston Road estate in Annesley. And Persimmon, and I won't name and shame Persimmon because I think it's important, they've been dreadful to my constituents. They decided to put a road on this estate made out of these semi-permeable blocks of stone, not a normal road. This was a type of block paving they put on the whole estate. And Nottinghamshire County Council, I've never seen these block paving before. So quite rightly, they've refused to adopt this whole estate. Because once they adopt the estate, they're then responsible for this block paving. Now, they've been arguing the toss now for over 10 years. I've been working on this for 10 years as a councillor, as an MP. And every year or so, Persimmon will turn up on site with the high-vis jackets on and the boots, and they'll meet me and they'll speak to residents. And they'll promise to have a plan within 6 months and put it all right. And then 6 months later, they've swapped the staff, they sack somebody, and somebody else turns up. This has been going on for 10 years. And I have a resident called Mr. Warhurst, Alan Warhurst. He's been campaigning with me for the past 10 years. I actually feel sorry for this bloke because it's got to a situation now where he thinks he's banging his head against a brick wall. But the killer is, when some of these people try to sell their houses, they may struggle. They may, somebody may struggle to get a mortgage on these houses because we have an estate which is, in essence, really a private estate. Nobody's adopted it. They don't want to adopt it. They don't want to adopt the highways because It could cost hundreds of thousands of pounds to put this work right. Now, I've got a solution to this, and I'm not sure whether the Minister will agree with me or not. But I would strongly suggest when we have house builders like Persimmon, and don't get me wrong, I've had this with Ben Bailey and Havant and other house builders, but they've been much better, much forthcoming at putting the repairs right. But what I would say is that if we get persistent problems with the house builder, then we should reject any planning application in the future until they start and, build these houses correctly. I think that would be the only way to stop these people. Because when a council adopts a new estate, they take on full responsibility. They can do that, and the house builders know that. But the house owners, the people that actually purchase the house, once they're in that house, they've got the keys, they've got the mortgage, they're locked into that house then, and they're stuck with it. And they can't really, battle with the house builders, whereas a local authority can. The local authority holds all the aces, really. They can say, no, we're not adopting that road, or we're not adopting these pavements, we're not adopting these street lights until you've set them to our standards. Same with the local water authority, like Severn Trent. They can say to them, no, we're not adopting that sewer, we're not adopting that fresh water supply until you've built them to our standards. Yes, I'll certainly give way.
I'm grateful he's making an excellent job at representing and highlighting the problems in his constituency with these new house developments. But in relation to NHBC, the National House Building Council, they obviously, in many cases, will provide a guarantee backing up the developer to fix the repairs that are required. I've certainly had difficulties with NHBC in the past. I wonder if the Honourable Member has any reflections on the role that they play in this.
My honourable friend for his intervention. As usual, it is spot on. Yes, it's quite right. I've had loads of these over the years. In fact, I had a big project running on a few of my new house builds in Ashfield just a few years ago, and I was getting exactly that problem. They think they've got a 10-year guarantee, and then when they try and get in touch with them and put the work right, they're next to useless. And this is why in great numbers, the people on these new housing estates are contacting their local councillor and contacting their local MP. I will give honourable members and right honourable members a tip whilst I'm in this room. If you get a new housing estate in your patch, which I'm getting shortly, because of some of the things that the honourable member for Shared Forest has said, go and knock on the doors, do a leaflet, do a snagging leaflet, do a survey, ask them if they're satisfied with their house bills. You'll be surprised how many of these surveys you get back from constituents who are deeply unhappy with the state of their house. Yes, of course I'll give way.
Thank the honourable member for giving way, and indeed I've done exactly that and done a street letter and flushed out all sorts of problems with new build estates. In those surveys, sometimes problems with management companies also come up. Is that something that the honourable member would like to comment on?
No, it is. Yeah, we've had problems with management companies in one of my estates in Kirkby in Ashfield, over a local park, the maintenance of a park as well, and some of the green spaces that come with these new house builds. But I just want to touch, Madam Chair, on what my honourable friend from Sherwood Forest alluded to, or actually stated, about the problems we've got with Ashfield District Council. And we've not had a local plan in Ashfield for 25 years nearly. And each time the administration changes, they fall out over a local plan. This has meant that developers can actually come and build or apply to build anywhere in Ashfield, and they are attacking our green spaces at a great pace. We was promised a local plan in 2018 by the current independent-led council, the Ashfield Independents. We were promised a local plan within 3 years because they ripped up the old plan to protect our green spaces. Fast forward 8 years, there's no local plan. There's one been put in. It's not protected our green spaces, and it's going to allow developers to run roughshod over our green spaces in Ashfield. And this will allow, again, developers, new house builds to come on, build their shiny new houses on green fields, and this will, again, lead to loads of problems. I know it's going to happen in my constituency. We're going to get loads of people complaining about their new build houses, and as my honourable friend adjacent said, people expect to have internet connected to their houses these days, and I think some of these housing companies are deliberately misleading their customers when they sell these houses. They don't admit that there's going to be any super fast broadband or broadband in there. most people just assume that this day and age it's like a utility, and you get your gas, your electric, your water and your broadband, and it's been a complete nightmare for some of my constituents on the newer estates. And I'll just close it in and thank the honourable member once again from Sherwood Forest for bringing this debate to Westminster Hall. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Sarah Russell.
Thank you. So I want to talk about some of the new build housing in my constituency, and I know that my colleague from Mid Cheshire has had some difficulties with the same set of developers as I have. So in respect of the housing regarding Spenview and Asbury Park, which were dealt with by Stuart Milne Homes, I will hand over to my very able colleague who is going to talk about the difficulties that they have had because we have the same problems. There's then the honourable mention that I won't be giving to Lochbrook Meadow in Congleton and Vistry and the job that they have done there, where they are now currently trying to persuade my residents to take on a management company and take over management of the estate, despite the fact that they haven't built the sewers to an adoptable standard or the roads to an adoptable standard. I can see nods around the room. It's very clear to me that I'm not the only one who's suffering with these difficulties. But the absolutely leading problem developer in my constituency at the moment is Zenith Developments Limited, who produce Scholars Place in Sandbach. Scholars Place in Sandbach is beautiful. It looks absolutely beautiful. It's detached homes, and there's also some social housing, mixed development, really looks great. But unfortunately, it wasn't finished with any sort of sewage pumping station. So, yeah, it is as bad as you would imagine that means it is. At the moment, sewage from these homes simply goes into a well. The well has a sort of semi-piece of plasterboard or something covering it, and it is currently completely inadequately fenced. So it is totally accessible and a massive drowning hazard of excrement, quite literally. It is incredibly dangerous, and it is on the walking route. It's about 200 metres at most from a local primary school. It is absolutely horrific. I think there are some real questions about whether or not we have sufficient legal powers in this country that could ever have been allowed to happen. It is an absolute public health hazard. It causes sewage to back up into people's homes. It causes sewage to back up onto the streets. The road literally runs with poo. The problems associated with both this development and also actually the Spenview development also have impacts for social housing providers, because in both of these cases there were Section 106 agreements and social housing has been provided. And so when there are then these enormous and expensive problems for residents, and social housing providers still part own the shared ownership homes on those sites, they become financially entangled in trying to deal with this matter. There is a real question about of course it's appropriate that they should be helping their residents. They part own these homes. But conversely, fundamentally, as a social housing provider, I feel really strongly that what we've got, and I suspect this is a national problem, is social housing providers who need to be providing social homes having to effectively cross-subsidise the failings of the private sector in producing these houses. And it is an absolutely shocking situation. So it's really important to me that we implement Section 42 of the Floodwater and Management Act 2010, which would improve some of the situation around sewer adoption, and that we have an equivalent for highways adoption, because that's the problem across every single one of these developments that I have just mentioned, is that the sewers haven't been dealt with properly and the roads haven't been dealt with properly, and people have bought their dream homes. They're so excited, and what they find they've got is an enormous financial liability. It is absolutely a widespread problem in my constituency, and it's destroying people's lives. It's destroying their mental health, and the level of distress amongst my constituents just can't be overstated. Whilst we are on the topic of new build homes, I just want to very briefly touch in terms of construction standards on disability and accessibility. So in London, it has been the norm since 2004 that Category 4 disability access is the absolute planning requirement. But in the rest of the country, that's not the case. Baseline Category 1 would only enable a household to be hypothetically visitable by a disabled person, and it does not guarantee ease of access for someone in a wheelchair. it seems to me a very, very basic minimum that homes that we are building now should be visitable by people who use wheelchairs. We have an ageing population and we have lots and lots of people who are waiting for accessible housing. So I would really like to see us as a government, as we are doing a large amount of housing development, which I very much welcome in terms of affordability, but that we are absolutely looking to ensure that that is, as a minimum, accessible and adaptable housing, and actually that a much more significant proportion of it is fully wheelchair adaptable and more of it is wheelchair fully accessible. I would suggest that we need to look at the planning frameworks from 2018 because they simply require that local authorities consider the impact of requiring accessible housing on the viability of their local plan. So actually it is almost a requirement that housing shouldn't be accessible if that will make it difficult to deliver the required number of homes. And of course, the people who I've just described, these developers, of course the first thing they say is that we can't afford to provide accessible homes, but of course they can. What they need to be producing is good quality homes that everybody can access and that are in estates that are surrounded by safe and secure environments in which the roads and the sewers are usable. It doesn't seem to me that this is too much to ask in an advanced industrial society. Thank you.
Robin Moore.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Jardine. Can I also thank the member for Sherwood Forest for securing this really important debate, and also just to say to her, as I did in my intervention, that it seems like both of us have experienced the challenges of Harron Homes, and she has my full sympathy of dealing with them, having had in my own constituency the managing director to come out. Not that he wanted to come out, but I certainly managed to get him there, where we had a meeting with residents to talk through some of the challenges. But I share the concerns that she has raised on behalf of her constituents, because they are not a good housing developer that has the best interests of their residents that move into their properties at heart. Construction standards are not just about bricks and mortar, Madam Chair. They go into a home and go much beyond the sense of belonging and feeling of living in a good quality space. Construction standards are also about the process of planning, site security and development maintenance, which all play a part in the experience of a resident that moves into a property. And I just want to use this opportunity just to talk about some of the challenges that I've experienced in my constituency, particularly in Longleat, Redwood Close. There is a development that has been undertaken by Accent Homes, and I was called to come and have a look at this site, about 8 months ago now, to look at this condition of an existing construction site that is happening right now. It's derelict because those that were involved in the construction went bust. But this is a site that is right in the heart of Longleat, and dare I say, it's been causing a huge nuisance, not only to those that were wanting to move into the development, now experiencing this development being delayed, but also those that are living in close proximity. In fact, I was invited along to go and see the access challenges to this particular site for myself, where neighbouring property has had boundary walls, drainage, access, all disturbed as a result of an existing construction that has been going on. Completely unacceptable. And I met again with their Director for Development, who came out onto site with me, which probably was about maybe 4 months ago now, and reassured me that things would be changing at speed. But I can tell you nothing has changed at all, other than them giving me further reassurance and them holding a residents' meeting. They have told me that there has been an appointee of Esh Construction Limited who has now been appointed to complete the works, but this works are not due to start until mid-spring, and then construction of this site at Longleat is not going to be completed until 2026. All the while, those neighbours who have had their property damaged, their access hindered, their boundary walls to their properties completely removed, allowing access to a very dangerous site being able to be accessed very easily, all that while they're having to live with this right on their doorstep, which is completely unacceptable. And it begs the question, what has the local authority been doing throughout this whole process? Bradford Council have not monitored the construction at all, not carried out sufficient enough enforcement action. Indeed, no enforcement action seems to have been carried out at all, and this is not a satisfactory outcome for the residents living in Longley.
Yes. He's making an excellent speech, and he's right to highlight the important role that local authorities have. But speaking as a former commercial property lawyer, does he agree with me that part of the problem is that when you're buying a new home, the purchaser is forced to take a contract package which is geared very much in favour of the developer, as opposed to when you buy a second-hand home, there's a degree of negotiation between the parties. Buying a brand new home, you take the pack from the developer, and the remedies for the purchaser to deal with these snagging items are very, very limited. Does he agree that that is part of the problem?
And I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. I absolutely agree. In fact, this is the point that's been made by the member for Sherwood Forest, indeed the member for Ashfield as well, that the challenge actually sits with, once you have purchased a property or tied into a contractual relationship, dealing with those snagging issues is a huge challenge. And actually, where do you then go? Because you have then been taken out of the remit of the local authority dealing with it, because they have approved the planning application, having not actually probably carried out any enforcement action at all. That's the problem that I experience by Bradford Council's lack of any attention to the challenges that we face within Keighley and Ilkley and our wider area that I represent. But it deals with the problem that when you're locked into a contractual relationship, maybe even moved into the property and have snagging issues, you are then effectively trapped and have no real ability for any organisation with any weight to deal with it. And that's the point actually that I would like to put to the Minister, and I hope that the Minister will address that in her summing up, in terms of what action is the government now going to take to deal with when new developments have been constructed of a poor quality, where concerns have consistently been raised, and it should not take those concerns to come to a Member of Parliament to deal with them, because that only seems to be the actual case when a housing developer suddenly realises they've got to do something about it. But what is the government going to do to provide more weight to these concerns that are being raised, so that if you have got snagging issues, you can have reassurance of those problems being sorted out? And I just want to conclude my comments around the challenges associated to deal with Section 106 monies, because this also deals with when planning applications have been approved, there is then a negotiation effectively that takes place between the developer and the local authority. And again, I'm having to rely on Bradford Council negotiating the best deal from whatever that Section 106 money is contributing to. And of course, Section 106 money is effectively a payment that deals with any mitigating factors that have negatively been imposed through that development on our community. And I just give the simple example, if those negotiations are not robust enough, that disadvantages the communities that we are representing. And then if that Section 106 obligation is not spent or enacted within a reasonable time, our constituents are then being significantly disadvantaged as a result of a local authority like Labour-run Bradford Council not responding well enough. And that disadvantages the communities that we represent. And I will give way.
Appreciate the honourable member giving way, as I realise he was wrapping up his comments. I have no knowledge about the workings of Bradford Council, being a Sussex MP, but in my experience, and I should declare an interest that I'm a district councillor in mid-Sussex, my experience is that actually local councils don't necessarily have the powers needed to move swift enforcement action. And in terms of Section 106 negotiations, they don't necessarily have the deep pockets of the development sector to lawyer up, if you like, and actually get those good deals. Does he agree with me?
Well, I would politely just push back a little bit, because my understanding is actually local authorities do have the powers available to them throughout the planning process to be able to challenge the planning application that is put before them, indeed have a robust level of negotiation with the developer to result in a Section 106 obligation being firmly and robustly constructed that delivers the best interests. It's up to the local authority, of course, whether they choose to utilise the powers that are awarded to them. And in my case in Bradford Council, when I feel that they don't use any of the powers that have been awarded to them in the first place. I will give way, yes.
In terms of the ability to do those things, I think that the many years of cuts to local authority budgets, which I think amount to about 30% of local authority budgets over the last 14 years, are highly relevant. But I would also add, and I wonder if he agrees, that there's a question here about directors' duties, because actually these organisations go insolvent. So no matter how great your 106 agreement is, actually you can't get that money because the organisation no longer exists to recover it from. I think there's a question about directors' duties. It should never ever have been possible for the level of disruption that I am discussing to have happened to those residents and the people behind it to just be able to go off in their Range Rovers. Would he agree?
Well, there's 2 points that the Honourable Lady raises there, and I'll take the second point first, which is about the director's responsibility, in which I absolutely agree, that it should not be for a housing developer to then move away from the scheme, leaving it either unfinished, like I've had in Longleat, where Accent Homes effectively did not deliver, causing huge nuisance to local residents in Longleat. That should not be an acceptable situation. But the point comes down to the on the Section 106 negotiations is when is the trigger point kicking in, and when is that trigger point in the best interests of those residents, and if it isn't, why isn't it? And I would put very strongly to the scenarios that I have in Bradford Council that those trigger points are not negotiated in the best interests of my residents. And and this is a local authority that back in 2021 actually through their statutory obligation to government said that they were in sound financial health. So I don't actually think that this is an issue of resource or government cuts to do with how they anticipate those negotiations going on. This is actually just pure lack of willingness to do their job. On that point, I would like to conclude my remarks because I know that there are many other speakers that want to contribute.
Thank you. We have to move on to the front bench in 12 minutes. So if you could keep your remarks to 5 minutes each, please. I'd appreciate it. Andrew Cooper.
Thank you, Ms Shelley. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I congratulate the Honourable Member for Sherwood Forest on securing this important debate. As my Honourable friend, the Member for Congleton, has previewed, I'm going to focus my comments today on the collapse of Stuart Milne Homes North West and the lasting consequences it's left behind for many families across my constituency and no doubt the wider North West region. Stuart Milne Homes went into administration in January last year, leaving several housing developments half built, although the 3 in my constituency were all complete and had been for some years. Nevertheless, homeowners have been left burdened with a potential financial nightmare as streets and sewers were never properly adopted by the local highways authority or the water company. This has created a situation where residents who have every right to expect a functioning, safe environment are instead left with a looming threat of significant costs. The reason for this predicament is simple. There was either no bonded Section 38 agreement in place with the local council or no bonded Section 104 agreement with the water company for the adoption of sewers, or in some cases both, despite residents having deeds on completion of their sale showing that the estate would be adopted. Now, I can only speak with direct knowledge of my own constituency, but I'm aware through research undertaken by my team and through conversations with the local authority and with United Utilities that this is far from a unique situation, leading one to wonder whether Stuart Milne were either negligent or actively missold properties on the basis that their roads and sewers would be publicly maintained. And my honourable friend makes a reasonable point about directors' duties under this circumstance. Without these legal agreements, there is no guarantee that local authorities or utility companies will take responsibility for maintaining these essential services. As a result, the burden of making these streets and sewers adoptable, essentially bringing them up to a standard, is being shifted directly onto the homeowners. Families who have already invested in their homes, often with their lifelong savings, are now facing huge unexpected bills. This is a situation that residents in one development in Middlewich are currently facing. Despite the estate having been practically complete for a decade, the lack of an appropriate agreement means the sewers on this development have not yet been adopted by United Utilities. Initial estimates from the inspections to date suggest that costs for the required remedial works could run into thousands. Costs are therefore liable to fall on residents. These homeowners are being forced to pay for poor planning, poor practices and poor execution through no fault of their own. We cannot and we must not allow this situation to continue unchecked. There is a fundamental need for greater oversight and accountability in the house building sector. The mistakes of Stuart Milne should not become the burden of individuals who are affected by them, and the gaps in regulation that allowed this to happen need to be addressed so that no homeowner is ever left in this position again. We need clearer, stronger regulations around the adoption of street and sewers. Developers must be held accountable for ensuring that all necessary agreements are in place before any properties are occupied, not after the damage is done. On the utility side, this can be done very easily by implementing Section 42 of the Flood and Water Management Act, but an equivalent is needed, I would argue, for highways. The financial cost of completing unfinished works should not fall on the shoulders of families who are innocent victims in this situation. In addition, there must be better protection for homeowners in the event of a developer's failure. We cannot allow this pattern of abandonment and negligence to continue, where large companies walk away without facing the consequences, while residents are left with the fallout. Moving forward, we must ensure that this situation is rectified and that no more homeowners are left to bear the burden of a developer's failure.
Stephen,
thank you, Madam Chair, and it's also a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and thank you to the Honourable Member for Sherwood Forest for securing this important debate. And having listened to the earlier contributions from my good friends, the members for Sherwood Forest and Ashfield, who represent neighbouring constituencies to me, I must say that I'm deeply saddened to hear of the difficulties that their constituents have faced during what should be a moment of joy and achievement, particularly for those families who are first-time buyers. And while many aspire to own their own home, it's become in my constituency a dream that many cannot afford. Not everyone in my constituency of Mansfield can afford to do this, but equally those who cannot also deserve to live in a home that's high quality and fit for purpose. And that's why I also welcome the efforts and the work being done by Mansfield District Council with their new council home building project. And as I saw with my own eyes a few months ago during a site visit, the council are now midway through a £7.7 million development scheme on the Bellamy estate in Mansfield, in which an initial 22 high-quality, affordable homes are being built. These homes, which will be rented to local families on the council's housing list, are all being built, I must say, to an extremely high standard and better than that which is legally required. And furthermore, the council are ahead of the game with regards to delivering these homes to exceed the Future Homes standard, which will seek to ensure that those new homes are built to an environmentally friendly specification. This includes, for example, building homes with higher standards of insulation to keep energy bills as low as possible, which is both good for the planet and good for my constituents' pockets and bills. And I'm glad to say also that the council's partner, Mercer Building Solutions, had to include a range of social value actions in the development, for instance ensuring that almost 90% of the workforce live within a 20-mile radius of the district. This is truly local houses for local people, built by local people. And I'm also very keen that councils and house builders look to British industry for solutions in construction. Locally, my constituency is the home to Power Saving Solutions, a company that's enabling a reduction in reliance on diesel-generated power on building sites. I've also learned recently about JCB's response with their hydrogen-powered combustion unit, which will also reduce carbon emissions in the construction industry. Two great examples of the private sector enfranchising themselves in our mission to make Britain a clean energy superpower. And Madam Chair, while I also congratulate our council for their innovation and forward thinking. What I've heard in this debate is that it's time for the private sector companies to up their game and think about the quality of houses before profit. Really important as a part of this that we invest in our local workforce and supporting British construction industry. I think that is why I also welcome that the Chancellor has announced £600 million of funding to train tens of thousands more skilled construction workers over the next 4 years. It will go towards creating more placements and technical excellence colleges, expanding skills in the sector. And I promised last summer that I would bring good quality jobs and opportunities to people in my constituency. In conclusion, I believe with this government pledging to build 1.5 million new homes during this term of office, it's important, and we've heard this evening, to ensure that these homes are built to high and the highest standards. And I therefore look forward to hearing more from the Minister about what the government will do to ensure that this is the case.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Lee Dillon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and can I add my congratulations to the Honourable Member for Sherwood Forest on securing this important debate, but also your powerful description of the impact on your constituent Zara facing those 70 defects. Now, with 89% of homeowners saying they're satisfied with the quality of their homes, we may think that all is well in the world of house building, but honourable members across this debate have been able to highlight where it simply isn't working for our constituents. And just scratching beneath that surface, it clearly shows a different reality. And because alongside that satisfaction rate, there is a stark statistic that 27% of new homeowners report 16 or more defects in their home. Now, that's not minor snagging. That's a quarter of new homeowners moving into homes riddled with problems. As the Honourable Member for Keighley and Ilkley addressed, affecting existing homeowners too. So let's be clear, this isn't a new problem. Reports going back as far as the 2007 Calcutt Review warned about poor quality construction and inadequate warranties. And yet, here we are in 2025, still debating the same failures. As the Honourable Member for Mid Sussex pointed out, confidence must be beyond question. But time and time again, we have seen developers prioritising profit over quality, and the consequences can be devastating. Look at Solomon's Passage in Southwark, completed in 2012 and condemned just 6 years later due to serious defects. In my own constituency of Newbury, the new build estate of Lancaster Park in Hungerford does not meet the expectations of people paying a high price to live there. These aren't one-offs. These are symptoms of a broken system. We also can't ignore that the UK has some of the worst insulated homes in Europe. There are 6 million households in the UK living in fuel poverty, including 3,000 in my own constituency. Yet, new homes are still built with gas boilers and inadequate insulation. Minister, we cannot keep building homes that are outdated the moment they are finished. The government had the opportunity to mandate future home standards in the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, but you didn't. Now, the Liberal Democrats would change that. Zero carbon must be the default. Every new home should have solar panels and renewable energy as standard. Planning must include climate resilience, flood mitigation, as the Honourable Member addressed in Schedule 24 of the Flood and Water Management Act 2010. And retrofitting must be a priority. We need a 10-year... I'll give way on that point.
Sorry, just one intervention. Yeah. Talk about all these great ideas, what the Lib Dems will do, like fitting solar panels and maybe heat pumps and stuff like that. Do you trust some of these house builders to do this to a high standard?
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention. I think it gets to the heart of this debate in actually whether it's just building a damp course correctly or installing cutting-edge climate technology. It's a requirement on the government to make sure that they've got a strong regulator there so that developers are held to account when they do fail. And as members have said around the chamber, we have unfortunately seen failure, but that shouldn't stop us as members of this House setting a high bar for them to reach. And so finally, Madam Chair, let's talk about infrastructure. Because it's not enough to build houses, we also need to build communities. And too often we see developments springing up without GP surgeries, schools, public spaces and public transport links that people rely on. Or highways that can't be adopted, as the Honourable Member for Ashfield has highlighted. And that's why we as the Liberal Democrats are calling for a planning system that guarantees delivery alongside housing targets. This means mandatory commitments from developers to fund GP practices, schools and green spaces. Public transport first. New developments should be built around sustainable travel, not car dependent. And sustainable drainage, with grey water recycling being included as standard in all new builds. Now, whilst the government have taken some positive steps, there is still much to do. These are all things that have been proven to be possible. Across the country, Liberal Democrat councils have led the way, from zero carbon homes when we ran York to 1,300 new council houses in Portsmouth. We know what works. Now this government must follow our lead. Every family deserves a safe, warm and high-quality home, not just a roof over their heads, but a real foundation for their future. I urge the Minister and the Government to take action. No more delays, no more excuses, just homes that work for people who live in them. Thank you.
Opposition spokesperson David Simmons.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chair. It is a pleasure once again to serve with you this evening, and I also add my congratulations to the member for Sherwood Forest in securing this debate. I was reflecting as we watch House staff go about their business that Hansard will recall all of the words that have been spoken by members in this debate. And they mirror some of those historical records, indeed from ancient Rome and ancient China, in which politicians complained about the quality of the construction of the Great Wall and many iconic buildings, and reflected on what could be done to ensure that buildings were constructed to the standard that they needed to be. But of course, for each new generation, the specific challenges change. We have aspirations around the standard of our homes that are very different. We have technology and constructional methods that are different, and we need to ensure that what is going on is fit for purpose. And the debate, whilst the focus is about new homes, has been very wide-ranging, has touched on elements of housing tenure and the implication that that has for the ability of the occupiers to get change dealt with, the complications of the legal situation around warranties and insurances, and the challenges that are reflected in the ability or otherwise of different local authorities to address complaints when they are brought forward. Now, the member for Newbury started out in reference to tenant satisfaction. And one of the things that is very striking is that on the whole, people in the UK describe a high level of satisfaction with their accommodation, with private renters being the most satisfied. But beneath that, as he set out, there are a number of challenges. And I would certainly encourage the member for Sherwood Forest to make contact with the member for Wyre Forest. Maybe there is a forest theme that's emerging through members bringing this issue forward, who has a private members' bill that is specifically around consumer protection for those who are commissioning building work, which will begin to address through the law many of the matters that have been brought forward. Indeed, I heard myself earlier on today from a group of housing associations about the need to appoint a clerk of works on new developments, somebody who was there on their behalf to monitor every single day exactly what was being constructed in order to ensure that the kind of problems which members across the chamber have described are not present when they come to undertake the landlord role in those properties. And the Federation of Master Builders is bringing forward a number of proposals that are about ensuring that the construction industry in the UK adopts significantly higher standards, both that build upon the experience of other countries, but also that reflect the particular circumstances of the UK housing market.
Give way on that point?
Of course.
Can I intervene? Thank you, the honourable gentleman, for giving way. Talk about sort of future-proofing our homes. One of the key things we could do with an ageing population is to make sure that all new homes are built to higher accessibility and adaptability standards. This was something that the previous government consulted on but never implemented. Do you agree that there was a lost opportunity there by not implementing M42 standards, that many new homes have been built but not to those higher standards?
Madam Chair, I don't think I would describe it as a lost opportunity, but it's an opportunity that we need to consider going forward. We recognise that we have a new government that has an aspiration for housing. We had a previous government that, despite all the challenges, set itself a target of around 1 million homes, came very close to delivering on that during the life of that Parliament. But we need to ensure, and it's a point that I've frequently made in debates in this House, that we are not simply thinking about the numbers of units, that the 1.5 million target is not something which can simply be achieved by packing the highest numbers of properties, of studio flats, into locations. We need to be thinking about what is the nature of homes, what is the type of housing that communities need, and how can a more nuanced approach ensure that we're building homes that also support our housing market. For example, people who may wish to downsize, people who may need to move because of disability, to find accommodation that's fit for purpose in their local area. And a number of members touched on the role that building control services play in the signing off of developments to ensure that they are fit for purpose. And all of that debate that's been reflected by members across the House has demonstrated the complexity of this issue. That we know that we have fire safety, which is considered through the lens of one set of legislation. We have building control, which is about fitness of construction standards. We have the local authority with its planning responsibilities to make sure that what is built is what has planning consent. And then we have the insurance industry, which essentially is a private market, but can decide for itself what it considers fit to be an insurable and occupiable property. And that has an enormous influence. And even in my own constituency, when I reflect on the former Royal Air Force Lime Grove development, constructed by Taylor Wimpey, where I've been engaging with constituents since I was first elected, and what's been a very slow process, not least because things like drainage that's been built well below the standard that is required, can only be rectified if you're prepared to demolish all of the homes that sit on top of that drainage. So these kind of challenges are enormously complicated. I'd like to place on the record my thanks to the members for Berwick, Roxburghshire and Selkirk, Keighley and Ilkley and Ashfield in particular for the points that they brought forward. They described from their own personal experience how they'd engaged with developments that took place in their constituencies in different ways to enable new occupiers to bring to wider public attention the concerns that they identified, the way in which they held to account local authorities for failure or a lack of action in dealing with issues that were patent and needed to be addressed, and some of the complexities around, in particular, as the member for Berwick, Roxburghshire and Selkirk described, around the legalities. Because it's all very well having a contract and having legal rights in theory, but if you cannot enforce those rights, they do not lead you down a useful path. Now, clearly, these are issues that, if we were in government, we would be taking forward, but as we are in opposition, we will be challenging the government to consider. So I'd like to make a few very brief points in that respect. Adoptable standards have been highlighted by a number of members as a significant issue that needs addressing, and I would encourage the government to consider within their planning applications and their encouragement for new planning to be delivered how we will ensure that adoptable standards are complied with. There are a number of examples of subsequent landlords, such as First Port, much addressed by members on all sides, where the management subsequently of these sites has been completely inadequate and compounds the issues that members have described. And finally, can we ensure that as we consider things like the learning from the Grenfell report that highlights just how complex these projects are to manage, that the learning described by the member for Mansfield, where private sector and local authority worked really well together to bring that innovation to bear, to ensure higher standards, that learning is something that we put into the structures of our legal approaches when it comes to all of the different issues around development, housing, planning and building control that have been described by members across the chamber this evening.
Thank you. Minister Ali.
Well, thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I want to start off by congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Sherwood Forest, for securing today's debate, and also congratulate other members for the excellent contributions they have made in this debate. There's a great deal of consensus about the challenges that members of Parliament face when they are trying to provide the support that constituents require in these sorts of circumstances. And I'm deeply sorry to hear about the examples of constituents who've experienced living in accommodation in the homes that their dream homes that they thought they were buying and moving into that have in effect turned into a nightmare. I know from my own experience as a constituency MP having to deal with similar cases just how traumatic and challenging that can be for all those concerned. Everyone deserves a safe and decent, affordable home, but after a decade of decline in house building, the dream of home ownership is getting further out of reach for so many. And this government was elected to tackle the housing crisis. We made a commitment in our manifesto to build 1.5 million homes over the course of this Parliament. And to deliver these ambitious targets, we will take a holistic approach to reviewing the entire housing system so we can unlock house building growth while ensuring the standards continue to be met. I'm grateful to honourable members for highlighting the insights that they have and some of the issues that we need to keep a close eye on. Building more homes of all kinds is crucial. Is a crucial part of the plan for change to grow the economy, raise living standards and transform people's lives. For us, growth is our number one mission, but even as we pull out the stops to boost the pace of house building, we remain absolutely focused in our commitment to protect and enhance our natural environment and strengthen the health and safety standards of the homes that we build. The regulatory reforms have already fundamentally changed the way buildings are designed, built and managed with more stringent oversight. The Building Safety Act 2022 brought in new structures, new ways of working and new expectations. And while the Building Safety Regulator has a safety duty to keep the safety and standards of buildings under review, that means as evidence comes to light, updates to building regulations and approved documents can be brought forward as needed. The Deputy Prime Minister announced last December that approved document B on fire safety is now subject to continuous review and asked the Building Safety Regulator to undertake a fundamental review of the building safety regulations. Guidance will be produced, updated and communicated to the construction industry with statutory guidance covering building design, now subject to continuous review by the Building Safety Regulator. Madam Chair, what we are doing is building on the work that has gone on so far. And the regulator is developing plans to launch a consultation on further changes by autumn 2025. Companies, briefly.
I'm very grateful for Mr. Giving way. In my constituency of North West Cambridgeshire, there are lots of young families seeking to buy their first home, and I'm very pleased that the government's very much committed to building those 1.5 million new homes. But it's important that people can trust they're buying a good quality home. Just down the road at the Darwin Green site in Cambridge, 36 new build houses with the building control privately managed have had to be demolished for foundational failures. So does the Minister agree that it's a real problem since the part privatisation of building control under Margaret Thatcher's government? It's a real problem for developers to essentially be able to choose their own regulator and that it's leading to standards falling?
I hope in my remarks already I have addressed some of these points, and we are, of course, looking closely at what further improvements can be made in relation to building regulation. We recognise the industry needs access to sufficient quality, safe materials, and are setting clear directions for growth for the housing sector and expect suppliers to increase their capacity to meet demand. In terms of the work in relation to the long-term housing strategy, this government is
very much focused on ensuring there's quality alongside the quantity that is desperately needed to ensure people have the housing that they need. New build home owners must feel confident that their new homes are safe, and the points that have been made today are well made, and we know that we must take the necessary action to get the quality as well as quantity right. This government is absolutely committed to improving redress for home buyers when things go wrong. And the regulatory framework ensures that the government's commitment to that 1.5 million homes over the current Parliament can be achieved safely and must be achieved safely and sustainably. Ultimately, by emphasising quality and safety, the reforms pave the way for innovative construction practices and materials, attracting skilled labour and boosting productivity within the sector. Madam Chair, we recognise, however, as we've heard from the debate today, that things can go wrong for people when buying a new build home, and that's why we'll bring into force measures to introduce a new homes ombudsman scheme, which developers will be required to join. It will have powers to investigate complaints and make determinations. I want to address the points that have been made, including his points, if you'll let me continue. It will have powers to investigate complaints and make determinations, including requiring compensation to be paid, and to help set expectations of scheme members around standards of conduct and standards of quality of work. We will also have powers to issue or approve a code of practice. This will make it quicker and easier for new build home buyers to gain redress when things go wrong, and help our wider objectives to bring up standards in the sector. The introduction of the new Future Home Standard represents a considerable improvement in energy efficiency and standards for new homes. From 2025, new homes will be future-proofed with low carbon heating and high levels of energy efficiency. These homes will be zero carbon ready, meaning that no further work will be needed to ensure they have zero carbon emissions as the electricity grid continues to decarbonise. I want to turn to some of the points that have been raised, including in relation to the local plan of my honourable friend. Due to the Secretary of State's quasi-judicial role in the planning system, I'm unable to comment on the details of the specific local plan, but this government is committed to the plan-making system, and it's the right way to plan for growth and environmental enhancement our country needs, by bringing local councils and their communities together to agree their future plans. In relation to a number of points honourable members made, and if I don't address them all, we can follow up in writing. I'm grateful to the honourable member for Mid Cheshire, Mansfield, Keighley and Ilkley, honourable member for Ashfield and Congleton, for raising a number of issues, including what more we can do around planning. We will look at the points that have been raised. In relation to the point made about disability, we will set out our policies on accessible new buildings shortly, new build housing shortly. The government expects local authorities to plan for and deliver the housing and infrastructure their communities need. The National Planning Policy Framework, revised in December 2024, promotes mixed-use sites, which can include housing designed for specific groups, and that means councils must consider the needs of disabled people when planning new homes, including older people and people with disabilities, and reflect this in their local plan. Madam Chair, I'm conscious that I need to leave a bit of time, but on the points, there were points made about water efficiency and drainage and waste disposal, which approved document H addresses, but I'm happy to write to my honourable friends about the points that have been raised that we haven't been able to address today, and I'm grateful for this debate, for the really constructive contributions from all members, including the front bench members, on this very important issue that affects all of us in different ways in our constituencies, and I'm determined to make sure we work together to address those issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michelle Welsh, briefly to wind up. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank all the honourable members here today for their contributions in what I think it was a very important debate for us to have. What is very clear from around the room is that those buying new homes actually do need those better protections, and it's not just the protections that they need going forward, it's the fact that they need that when they are addressing it, it shouldn't be that they have to contact a Member of Parliament in order to get those issues resolved. So, better protections, some really horrifying stories that we've heard today. And my constituencies, like people living across the country, deserve better. When you buy a property, you're locked into that contractual agreement. It's impossible often to get the repairs and snagging completed, and that shouldn't have to be the case. We must change that. Time and time again, we see profit before quality. Accessible homes, affordable homes are so critical. Today, honourable members have raised about the processes to ensure...
Sorry, I have to. Our time is up.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, but I thank you for that. The question is that this House has considered construction standards for new build homes. As many of you as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned.